asked whether like a Bollywood movie with a 100% non-white cast, whether that was considered diversity in media. You know.
Yeah, so I think I responded something along the lines of I'm referring to like diversity in Hollywood, and like Western media in general.
Okay.
Um,
So, because Indian people in India are the overwhelming majority, nothing impressive about an all non-white cast in a Bollywood movie. Understandably so.
uh, I feel like it'd be a very weird thing, but I don't think
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
be a particularly hated thing in an Indian like culture.
Okay. And so diversity. Would you say that a Hollywood movie that is an all black cast, would you say that that is diversity in media?
Yeah, that would be a form of diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, because they are a minority in America. And
Yeah,
so by giving them a majority space in the film, that does something good.
I'd more word it as it's a class of people that is not commonly represented as much as like other classes, such as like white people or males.
Okay. We'll get into that really quickly. My
Yep.
my last question related to non-Western films would be in the same way that you might think. Well, I guess I should ask this first. Do you think that there is some sort of moral obligation on Western society, or let's just say America to narrow the view, uh, to represent minorities more in film?
I think it depends on the like film. Like you can definitely like if you wanted to tell a story about like the early stages of Europe, it would be kind of like weird to portray black people as like rich people there because they weren't. Um,
Well,
so
how do you
yeah,
feel
there are.
about something? How do you feel about something like Hamilton? The Hamilton musical is black people and brown people taking the roles of white colonialists.
Yeah, so I think if you want to do it, that's fine. But I'm saying if you want to keep the racial identity of white to tell a story that is like based on white people, then that's fine. But if you do want to add like black people into there, then that's always going to be a good thing.
Okay. Do you think that it's always going to be a good thing in the case of a non-white country, let's say Ghana, having an all-white cast for their movie?
Um, so yeah, so just quick, I was referring to Hollywood, but I can answer that.
Yeah,
So
I promise I'm not going to keep deflecting to other
yeah,
countries. I'm
yeah,
just I'm getting
I
this
was
out of the
making sure.
way first before we focus on Hollywood.
Yeah, so I would say, like with things like Bollywood or something, I think like correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the whole point of Bollywood is that it's supposed to be an Indian media. So portraying white people there would kind of defeat the point of it. Like having
I don't
Bollywood
know.
is the diversity in and of itself.
I honestly don't know the answer to that because I don't know Indian culture. It's just that you're going with the position that diversity in media is always good, and uh, you're extending this not just to the idea that like several races should be represented in one Western movie. You're saying that like if I make an all black cast for my American movie, that is always good. So if that is always good, I'm wondering about in other foreign countries where white people are the minority, or any other racial minority. Asians are a minority in Africa. Like,
Hmm.
do African filmmakers in Kenya have the same? Is it still the case that if a Kenyan filmmaker made an all white cast or an all Asian cast, is that always good?
Yeah, so I understand what you mean. So like a lot of so Hollywood and like Western media is very worldwide, compared to like something like Bollywood, which is like very popular in India and not too many other places. So someone in like Africa or something, even though they are a minority race there, would still have the representation through Western media, like Hollywood. So I don't think there is as much of a need to make like all white films in Africa because of that.
Okay, so there's not as much of a need, but do you think there is a need?
Um, like I don't think it would be a negative thing at all.
Okay, you don't think it would be a negative thing. Okay, I was just a little curious about that. Doesn't really hinge on my argument. Just wanted to see where you stand there.
Yeah, no.
So diversity in media is always good. I find this an interesting claim that I was willing to wrestle with because I think it would be easier for you to argue that diversity in media is not bad, but you're coming from a much more positive claim that no matter what we do with the movie, it's always good. So could you give me your reasoning for that?
Yes, so I would say the pros of having diversity in a movie always outweigh the cons.
Okay. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? I need to understand.
Yeah, so like when you have diversity in media, like even if it ends up portraying some like stereotypes towards like races, at the end of the day, like it gets like that like it gets the like if you hire a black person, and even if that black person is stereotyped, it still like gives that black person money. It still gives that black person popularity, at which point people can like aspire to be like that black person. um,
Well,
Other
but
things as well. Like he could be a role model. Like even though he is stereotyped, you can still like see him as a like cool person to look up to. Like the black guy in
how
Rush Hour.
likely how likely is that if they are a bad stereotype? I mean, if I'm a black person, I'm seeing this like awful racist caricature. You know, we're talking in the truest sense of the term an Uncle Tom. How much does this really inspire me as a black person?
Um, I don't know too many examples of stereotypical black people that bad, but like I can like give the example of I was about to say the black person from Rush Hour. Like he is
Oh,
very stereotypical, like black, like city guy, and like even though like people would say that's kind of racist to stereotype black people that way, he is still loved by so many people, and he's still a really fucking like successful actor because of that movie.
maybe with that, but what about something like have you seen clips, not even the whole movie, but just clips of the movie Song of the South?
I don't think so.
So it's this Disney movie that Disney like is actively trying to erase the existence of. It's a like there's this black uh Uncle Tom. I think he's a slave. I'm not quite sure. It takes place in like the antebellum 19th century South. And they hired a black man to dress up in this caricature and singing like a Negro spiritual, not even a real Negro spiritual, but just like a made up one for the movie. Zippity doo dah, zippity day.
Hmm.
And yeah, like black people make fun of this. It's not just me making fun of this. Black people are making fun of how crappy this portrayal is. And so, and you know, honestly, that's just the first example I can name. But there are movies that I don't know the name of anymore that I've seen from college classes and high school. I've been in, and like they showed me these movies where like these black guys would just sound so dumb, like so it's really degrading. Like, sure, they gave a black man money. They gave some black actor out there money to do this role, but they look like a bumbling idiot, and they basically are the pet dog of the family. Um, I think while you can argue that this helped one black person in the sense of giving them financial compensation, um, This was a negative for the perception of black people in America.
Yeah, so I guess I would ask, like, so if a black person wasn't, like, if the person being made fun of, like, wasn't a black person, and instead they just made fun of black people in general, like, would that outcome, like, be any better? So I would argue, like, it wouldn't really matter. Like, a black person being on screen, does not make that movie any worse.
So you're saying like if they had like a person who's white playing that same role, or just a film that is generally dismissive of black people, that's not worse than a black person being there to fill that role, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I'd say like both have like an equal amount of like harm in it. The only difference here would be the situation where they hire a black person. At least they're hiring a black person, giving more like of the industry to black
Yeah.
people, and possibly getting black people to be inspired to be on television.
So that's it's the part at the end there where I take umbrage because you say get inspired, and I don't see it being likely that black people are inspired by that. Let me take for example the black exploitation movies from like the '60s and '70s. These movies at first were being spun. You know, they were made by these white directors in Hollywood as like, hey, like we're giving representation to black people. Um, and they were these movies. Now, in recent years, they've kind of garnered a nostalgia. But at the time, they were despised by some of the largest black organizations in America, the NAACP, the National Urban League. They were criticizing these movies for how uh, the overwhelming majority of them portrayed blacks as engaging in criminal behavior, behaving as pimps and hustlers, slapping women around, treating them as property. Um, and it was actually the NAACP's call to end black exploitation films that led to their decline. Um, the fact is, a lot of black people weren't watching these movies in those days. It was, I mean, mostly white people curious at, you know, the types of action and drama in those films. Um, and you know what? You know, like in the '90s, you would see some black artists who would, you know, try to pay homage to these things. But to me, it ended up creating a bigger negative because so say for instance, I was reading on Wikipedia about this, and Snoop Dogg and Ice T and a few other artists from that day, they would you know, in their music videos dress in the way that like Willie Dynamite did, or Mac, or Shaft. They would portray these characters and create, you know, they would look like the no nonsense pimps from those black exploitation films, and it gave them a sense of empowerment, right? Like they're the pimp, they can do whatever they want. But what this led to was like a shift in hip hop culture, and by extension black culture, for the negative, because it leads to black people putting the materialism and you know, what do you call it, the high status behavior of a pimp, putting that on a pedestal as something to admire. And then at the same time, it makes black people resentful of themselves and other black people when they don't achieve that high status life of gold chains, slapping around women in nice cars.
Yeah, so there's two things here. When you brought up that the movies that were trying to pay like homage to black people, and a lot of like black people at the time weren't really inspired by that.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, like I hate to sound like a broken record, but if these movies didn't pay any black people, but then did the same thing anyway, like that would just be just like the same amount of negative and but less positives. Okay, like there's less
So
like black people in this in the industry.
I think the way you're looking at it is that if it does one good thing for one black person, then we can go with your statement that diversity in media is always good. But I tend to look at it from, what is the net gain? Are we having a net gain or are we a
No,
net
no, that was
negative?
my point. But that
Yeah.
was my point. So if you put diversity in media, that you're always going to get a net gain there. Putting diversity in these films will never make the film more negative. It'll only make it more positive.
I don't think so because of the lasting cultural impact of these decisions in the films.
But these films will already are going to make this lasting cultural like problems. Why not like make it a little bit better by putting some black people in the
So
acting industry?
so they're already bad. Like they're,
Yeah,
the
they're
fact
already bad, but we can make it a little bit better by adding diversity.
making a bad thing a little bit better doesn't make it good the way I see it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
So
I'm
so
being a
putting
stickler
diver
with your claim that you're saying good. And so to me, like if you take, this is a really crass example, but if you take dog shit and you put sprinkles on it, that doesn't make the dog shit good if I eat it.
Yeah, so this feels like an insult, but you're playing with the words a lot. I'm not saying diversity in media makes that media good. I'm saying diversity in media is always good. So if you get media and you put diversity into it, it is the result is always going to be more
All right.
positive than the
I think I
original.
got it. I want to understand you better. You said something there. You said you weren't saying this. I'm saying this. Could you say that again for me?
Yeah, so I'm not saying diversity in media makes the media good. I'm saying
Okay.
diversity in media is always good. AKA, if you have media and you put diversity
Okay.
into it, it's always going to make that media more positive, not negative.
Okay. It's always going to make it more positive. Uh, maybe there's something. There is something that seems contrary to that. I'm going to show you something I
Yeah,
found. This was a study, just to something to look at. I'm sending this in the debate chat for everyone to look at. Um,
yeah,
but before I drop the link, I need to explain the study. There was a study uh, that was analyzing Latinos' self perception, uh, positive, negative, what sort of emotions they felt about their own in group as Latinos when faced with different media. So they did an experiment where they had Latinos watch a very stereotypical Latino film, or a clip from a film. Basically, this was like some guy who was like, "Hey, Holmes, you cholo esses," something
yeah,
really stereotypical. Uh, and then there was another group of Latinos who were shown a clip of two Latinos having a serious dinner table conversation, or I think it was a romantic one. I don't know. They had just a casual conversation that anyone of any race could have, um, but they were Latino. And then there was a control group where Latinos were asked about how they felt about being Latino and things like that without being shown any clip at all. Okay. And I'm going to send the results of it right now. Okay. So it's in the debate chat. So what you'll see is that they actually had a more positive uh, image of themselves overall uh, when they were shown no clip. Whereas when they were shown both the comedy, it lists comedy and drama. Comedy is the one that had the racist depiction. The drama is the one that had like a serious conversation. Um, and so you see almost no difference between the two media clips, but you do see there is a higher positivity rating when they were shown no clip at all. And so what this makes me wonder, and I have a couple of other studies I can bring in to support what I'm about to say, but what it makes me wonder is that maybe when we live in a society that tells us that Latinos are oppressed, maybe that in and of itself, uh, it sort of has a negative. It doesn't. How do I put this? The presentation of Latinos in media is not going to change the perception of Latinos in media for the better if Latinos already believe that they are oppressed.
Yeah. So the only problem I have with this, with the chart you just gave is it doesn't really show like let's say you have a racist film, like it's like racist against black people.
Yeah.
This chart doesn't really show whether or not putting a black person in that film would make them more or less like positive about it. Because at the end of the day, they are still being referenced by it. They just aren't being like visually presented. So my thoughts are their positivity would be closer to the comedy or drama rather than no clip at all.
Say that again. I'm just trying to.
Oh yeah, sorry.
understand.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
I'll try to make it a bit more clear. So if there is a racist film about black people, and there is a
Yeah.
black person that sees that film,
Yeah.
I'm saying their thoughts about that will be much closer to the comedy or drama, rather than the no clip one. Just because even if they aren't visually represented in that, they are still being referenced to.
So because they're still being referenced to, what's your conclusion?
So I would say like the reason why these Mexican people had a positive were positive about themselves afterwards was due to the fact that they didn't see any media at all, whereas people
So
are seeing racist media. It's just the question is whether we should have this racist media with black people or racist media without the black people.
So in the study, like I feel like you understood me the first time, but for some reason I'm not understanding you, and I want to fix that. The comedy was the racist film in this study, and the drama was the not racist film that showed Latino people. And so when you look at the section that says positive, you'll see that the comedy and the drama are about the same. Uh, but when they were shown no clip, that was actually when Latinos felt better about themselves.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say this. It doesn't align with what we're talking about because we aren't seeing a racist film and a not racist film. We're seeing a racist film with black people or a racist film without black people. It's a small difference, but like it could make a difference in like whatever data point they have here.
Yeah, but I think this is a testament to how, like, putting them in media isn't going to change their perception of themselves. Um, it could
Yeah. So
change. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So if you want to like argue that these films, like these racist films, shouldn't have been made in the first place, I 100% agree with you. But I'm saying if these films are going to be made like in the past,
I'm not just talking
so
about racist films in this case. I'm talking about even if we have no racist films and we just have Latino people, if they're still living in a society where they think they are less than white people for various socio-political reasons, I don't think their casual presence in a film does anything to change that. Um, yeah.
sorry, can you repeat that? My bad.
Yeah, so the if Latinos have the perception, true or not, whatever the case, if they believe that they are in a society that is oppressing them sociopolitically, the representation in film only makes them aware that they exist, and as Latinos, they know they exist. I don't think that it changes how they feel about themselves. I think it's ultimately their own cultural impression that decides whether they are uh, basically makes them inspired or not. I don't think them seeing Latinos in a film casually makes them think they're on better footing now for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd agree with that. The only problem I have is I don't know whether or not you're saying this, but it feels like you're saying if we say the racist movie you're talking about, that Disney one, say
Yeah.
if they didn't put a black person in there and they just had the same movie but without a black person, are you
Yeah.
saying that that movie would make would have the same results as the study that you put?
The same results as this study. Uh,
That like
could
black
be
people seeing this, like because they
that
didn't
they
see
wouldn't
themselves
feel that
visually, they would feel
yeah,
like more positive about themselves.
they would feel more positive of themselves if they had seen no clip at all, probably.
Yeah,
Uh,
so all I'm saying is I don't feel like this chart properly shows that because this chart bases it on no clip at all, whereas what we're talking about is a racist film
there's a
with.
racist. This chart shows being shown a racist clip as well.
I don't, no, no, no. So what I'm talking about is the scenario we're talking about with this movie is whether or not it should have like a racist movie with a black man or a racist movie without a black man.
Right.
And this chart isn't talking about that scenario. It's talking about a
Okay.
slightly different
Yeah. Yeah.
scenario.
Okay. I see what you're saying. You need a scenario where they're shown a movie. Not just you can't just have a racist portrayal and then a portrayal that has Latinos but it's not racist and then no clip at all. We need a fourth example where there's something not racist but it has no Latino people. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, close to that.
Oh, where you're saying that it also needs a racist clip but no Latinos in it.
Yeah, yes, a racist clip with no Latinos. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's making fun of like Latinos, but it doesn't visually represent them. So it's making a whole bunch of like Mexican jokes, but it never actually like shows Latinos
Yeah.
because
Um
that would be much closer to what we were looking at. I understand that is not something that could like be easily like found in like research,
yeah,
obviously, but
yeah.
like yeah, that's the tricky thing here is that that's a really hard thing to find out through research.
Yeah. So I was trying to do a little bit of research about this cuz I really was trying to change my own mind. Uh you know, something that comes to my mind too about representation is that if your conclusion is what Hollywood goes with, that diversity in media is always good, so we always need to be doing it for the better of people of color. Um, I think it inevitably leads to people questioning whether this role was earned, like, this lead acting role in the big Hollywood movie goes to a person of color. Well, was this earned or was this filling a quota? And that's something a lot of people are asking themselves today with the diversity we're seeing. And I just can't help but think that it would sort of put a dent in what they're aiming for here. I mean, the good of diversity in media should be in theory that it makes them represented. It helps them, you know, I guess you'd say, feel better about themselves, uh, feel like they're on the up and up in life. But if they don't know whether they've earned this position or not, I think that could make them feel either the same or worse.
So just quickly, so at the start, there's this misconception. So just because diversity is always going to lead to good outcomes does not mean that studios need to always have it. Like for example, like we still have movies with like with like almost all white cast, and there's like nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is when we do add diversity here, it is always going to be a positive thing.
You say that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the logical conclusion this could lead to is that every time you put a white person in a movie, the consequence is that you're depriving a minority from taking that position. And so you are depriving a better standing for people of color in this country.
Yeah, although that might be true, that is like an inevitable reality that we kind of have to live with.
I think it's absurd, like that. You know, every time a white person is put in a movie, like it's depriving,
But
that role is being taken from someone else. I think it completely removes, one, the meritocracy, and then two, it denies the statistics of the different races. It's like if you're living in a country that's 70% white, you can't expect to always have, people who are only 5%, 2%, or 14% taking up all these roles.
I guess just real quick. So as far as choosing a like white person over a minority and not choosing that minority would like hurt their like race, like we do this all the time with like pretty much any job. Like we like choosing a white person is always going to benefit white people over like black people, whether it be a job at McDonald's or a job at a CEO company.
So I wouldn't really agree that hiring a white person benefits white people. I think it benefits the person,
No, so typically people do work within their like race a lot of the times, just because of how like things like redlining works, which forced like races to kind of segregate. Like white people being wealthy will always help other wealthy white people, and rich black people will always help other rich black people. That's just a thing that does happen in our society.
But I think a bigger question is whether these people have an in-group bias to the extent that it is a hemorrhage on the job, or that it leads to unfair outcomes all the time. I don't know if you can be sure of that just by the person getting the job and being that race.
So people don't need a bias to like participate in like racial structures. You can like love black people, but still end up supporting white people over black people. Like that is just something that happens.
I don't know if it does in the way that you're describing it.
So like let's say you're in a white neighborhood, as a lot of white people are, and like let's say you make a lot of fucking money or something, you like go on like make huge renovations to your house and other shit and end up like raising taxes, and long story short, your whole entire area starts getting a little bit more wealthier. That would bring up other white people in your area. So even though you aren't directly doing it, you are helping other like white people to succeed. There is nothing like you're not trying to be racist. You're not trying to hurt black people, but you do end up like helping white people instead of black people.
it's not at the expense of black people. It's that the people there happen to be white. I'm not hurting, it's not like I have any sort of culpability there.
So the way like wealth inequality works is that generally, if like one group of people gets more wealthy, then if the other group of people doesn't get more wealthy, then they are going to be disadvantaged. I don't know the word. They're going to have a worse experience. So if
Yeah,
you,
I
yeah, so if you, you on.
yeah, this isn't tied to media. We've got to tie this back to media.
Yeah, it's a little bit off
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah. Uh I don't know if we should
So,
just end the debate here. I mean, because the way I'm looking at it, I'm still looking at it from the perspective of the representation in media doesn't make things better for black people. It makes, the least it can do in the worst films we're talking about. Because remember, we're saying diversity in media is always good. Uh, you know, what that what that leads to is I'm too tired. Holy shit.
so good. I can bring it up to this. Earlier you said something along the lines of if we have if we have people being picked because of diversity's sake, and then people will bring
Yeah,
up the
yeah.
idea that those people didn't actually earn their
I
like
just
roles; they were just brought in because like
I
to fill a
know
quota.
that something you said earlier was that like the media, the diversity in media doesn't make the media good, um, but it makes things better for the black people. And I don't think it does. I think it makes it better for the people you hired. Um, we have to consider the cultural consequences of racist movies.
Yeah, but that cultural consequences is already there. All you're doing is like either hiring a black person, meaning a black person has now been like helped. So
Well
that's
then, well then we
obviously
have to
a good thing.
Well, then we have to consider the racial consequences of diversity quotas. I mean, by creating a quota, you're getting rid of merit, and we can no longer distinguish whether they earned it or whether they didn't.
Yeah, so yeah, this is what I was going to talk about. So the problem with whenever people talk about these diversity quotas and things like this, it gets into this. You probably won't agree with me here, but this very racist idea that if we purposely choose a black person instead of a white person, that black person won't be like the best person for the job. At the end of the day, there are so many talented people in every
Well, it's
single
not that
race.
okay, hold on. This is so I believe that every black person who gets a role in Hollywood is qualified for that role. Like, I don't think, that's the same with any job where there's a diversity quota. I do think that any person who earned a job from a diversity quota is qualified for the job, or they wouldn't hire them. It's just that you have varying levels of who is best for the job. You can have two qualified people, but one is better for the job than the other person. And we will never know whether these people are better for the job or not with this way of thinking.
Yeah, so like believe it or not, like acting isn't this like special field that has this huge mastery rate. A lot of actors are at pretty much the same skill level. So trying to like get rid of race to try to pick the absolute best person, is not only a waste of time, but also kind of defeats the purpose of like acting is like you're supposed to pick someone who like kind of
You're supposed to pick people that represent the characters well.
yeah, I was trying to get like word that you're
But
supposed to
like
pick someone
when
who
you look at
represents the character, not the person who is the best actor.
yeah, it's just when I think the consequences of the thinking that diversity in media is always good it leads to the new decision with the Oscars, where in 2024 they're going to demand something like 40% of all movies nominated for Best Picture must, or I think it's every movie nominated for Best Picture must have at least 40% non-white cast. And they think they're doing something so good there. And I'm like, this is going to change what types of movies get nominated. It's not just going to change like the demographic makeup of the people in these movies. It's going to change what movies are made, because it's unlikely that they're going to be making like, 18th century movies with black cast members, unless it's about slavery, of course. Um, it's unlikely you're going to get like Holocaust survival movies. These are not people of color, and so this is a cultural issue that I don't think makes things better. I don't think it's always good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see how having a push towards diversity would automatically lead to making sure there's a 40% like racial quota in every single movie that gets nominated. I don't think that's a situation which would ever happen.
No, it's happening in the Oscars.
That's an actual like policy
That is
that
an
they
actual
added.
thing that, yes.
Could you give me a link to that? But like, if
Oh,
that is
yes.
happening, then I don't agree whatsoever. Yeah.
It's an inconsequence of this thinking, though. Oscars, diversity.
So as far as I would say, if that is real, I'll take your word for it. I would say that's more of a problem with our like current media. What's I don't know the right words for this. But basically, this huge push towards like total diversity everywhere. Like things around the cancel culture stuff, where cancel culture stuff, where people
So just
like
send a link
if
right
you
there. That's from the Oscars.
yeah, I read it. But yeah, if people like don't like represent black people in the absolute perfect way, then like they'll go and get cancelled online. Like that's a part of that culture. I don't think just like prioritizing diversity in movies causes this issue. I might be wrong about that.
All right, so I was reading the stuff while you said that. Could you tell me that last sentence you said there?
Yeah, so I was basically saying how the thing that we're talking about here with having the 40% like racial casting is more of a problem with our current cancel culture rather than anything. And this whole idea that if you don't represent like black people in the best way possible, then like you're a horrible person and things like that.
This isn't about how they're represented, though. It's about that they're represented. That is what this quota is about.
Like, yeah, but like that's a part of how they are represented.
I kind of thought your position on this was the opposite of that, because we were saying how, the media, like their representation in the media doesn't make the media good. You were condemning,
I know.
these races from, yeah.
I was just talking about like what you referenced. Like I don't agree with this idea at all. I don't think we should be having a racial like quota.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think I
agree with
think
that
it
at all.
ties back to what I said about how, from this way of thinking, any person of color, any white person in a movie, uh, is taking up a spot that a person of color should fill. You know, because if you don't, you're not doing something that is for the greater good.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before, but we always like do things that like will cause like harm to other like races and things like this.
Okay. Well,
Like that's
I
just an inevitable
yeah.
inevitability.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go in circles anymore.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I think it's got to be called off here. But I think it's been a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, it was a nice convo.
Yeah, I hope the people vote wisely.
Yeah, cool guys. Did you want a closing statement each, or did you just want to call it?
If he wants to say something, he can go for it.
No, I've made my case. Yeah, diversity in media is not always good. I think it needs to be on a case by case basis.